the scorching deserts of India, a weary army had stopped. The soldiers had been marching for 10 years, fighting for 10 years. Now they missed their homes. Before them stood their young commander, the same fire still burning in his eyes. More land, more victories, he was saying. But the soldiers had said enough. At that moment, history's greatest conqueror experienced his greatest defeat. He was defeated by his own soldiers. So who is this man? How did he start conquering the world at 20 years old? How did a Macedonian prince change the course of world history? Dear followers, tonight I will share with you the incredible story of Alexander the Great, the tale of a life where legends, victories, and tragedies are intertwined. If you love the stories of history's greatest conquerors, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. Be sure to write in the comments which historical figure you want to hear about. If you're ready, let's dim the lights and dive into the chaotic world of the 4th century BC, into the fascinating story of how a prince embarked on a journey to become a god. The screams echoing in the marble corridors of the Palace of Pella, on the mountainous lands of Macedonia, announced the birth of a legend. The year was 356 BC. The world had not yet seen the power of Rome. The baby born was not an ordinary prince. His father, Philip II, was the king who made Macedonia the most powerful state in Greece, and his mother, Olympias, was an Epirot princess, famous for mysterious rituals. According to legend, Olympias said that Zeus visited her during pregnancy. Whatever the truth, the baby born had an extraordinary destiny. Olympias was a strange woman. At midnight she danced with snakes in secret ceremonies, performing the mysterious rituals of ancient gods. She was feared in the palace. Her marriage with Philip was also a political calculation. There had never been real love between them. Growing up in this tense atmosphere, little Alexander was caught between his mother's mystical world and his father's harsh reality. His childhood years passed with war stories. The Macedonians were a warrior people. Male children were raised as warriors from the cradle. Alexander had learned to ride horses when he was only 7 years old. When he first saw his legendary horse named Bucephalus, he calmed this wild animal that no one could tame and rode it. His father Philip, amazed by this sight, understood that his son would accomplish great things. Philip wanted the best for his son's education. He brought Aristotle to Macedonia. The greatest philosopher of the ancient world taught Alexander for 3 years. Philosophy, mathematics, medicine, geography, literature. Alexander received excellent education in every field. But the lesson that impressed him most was Homer's Iliad epic. The story of Achilles enchanted him. He too would one day achieve such immortal fame. Aristotle's influence shaped Alexander's world of thought. His teacher instilled not only knowledge, but also curiosity in him. Unknown lands, distant countries, exotic cultures. All of these ignited Alexander's imagination. Aristotle also taught him political strategy, how to govern, how to make decisions, how to influence people. When he turned 16, his father left him as regent and went on campaign. Alexander was now governing Macedonia. His first test was the Thracian rebellion. The young prince acted quickly, suppressed the rebellion, and founded a city called Alexandropolis in the region. This was the first city he founded, the beginning of many more. He fought alongside his father Philip at the Battle of Chaeronea. This victory won against the Greek allied army proved that Macedonia was the master of Greece. Alexander showed great courage in battle, destroyed the sacred band of Thebes. Philip was proud of his son, but at the same time he was worried too. Alexander was very ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. The relationship between them gradually became tense. When Philip made a new marriage, the situation became completely confused. Philip, who married Cleopatra, the daughter of a Macedonian noble named Attalus, had abandoned Olympias. In the argument that broke out at the wedding feast, Alexander got angry with his father and left the palace. He lived in exile for months. However, when his father called him back, they reconciled. But fate had different plans. While Philip was preparing for the Persian campaign, he was killed by Pausanias, one of his most trusted guards. The murder was shocking. While Philip was watching a theater performance, Pausanias approached him and plunged his dagger into his chest. The king died instantly. The reason for the assassination is still debatable. Whether it was personal revenge or political conspiracy is unknown. But the result was clear. 20-year-old Alexander had become king of Macedonia. When he ascended the throne, the situation was chaotic. The Greeks had declared independence. Rebellion had broken out among the northern barbarians. Relatives claiming the throne had sprouted in the palace. The young king acted immediately. First, he cleaned up internal threats, had rivals killed or sent into exile. Then he marched north, brought the barbarians to their knees. The Thebes rebellion was the biggest test. The powerful Greek city did not recognize Macedonian sovereignty. Alexander besieged the city, breached the walls, and allowed a terrible massacre to take place. 30,000 people were sold as slaves. The city was razed to the ground. This brutality frightened all of Greece. Now no one dared to oppose the young king. Preparation for the Persian campaign began at full speed. The time had come to fulfill his father Philip's dream of destroying the Persian Empire. Alexander gathered his army, 35,000 elite soldiers, the best weapons, the most experienced commanders. Also accompanying him were engineers, doctors, historians, philosophers. This was not just an invasion, but also a research expedition. The crossing of the Hellespont was a symbolic moment. Alexander plunged his spear into Asian soil and said, "I receive these lands as a gift from the gods." He visited the ruins of Troy, laid a wreath on Achilles' tomb. He was now walking on the lands he had read about in Homer's epic. The first major battle took place on the banks of the Granicus River. Persian satraps were waiting for him with a powerful army. 20,000 infantry and 2,500 cavalry were lined up on the opposite bank of the river. The Persians planned to drown Alexander, trying to cross the river. But Alexander set aside classical tactics. He set up a diagonal phalanx formation. Macedonian cavalry on the right wing, heavy infantry in the center, Greek allied units on the left wing. When the battle began, Alexander himself plunged into the river at the head of the companion cavalry. He was the first person to enter the water. This move boosted the soldiers' morale to the peak, but at the same time carried great risk. Persian archers met the attack with a rain of arrows. Alexander's horse was wounded. He himself also took heavy damage. He lost his helmet. His armor was riddled with holes. Rusaces, one of the Persian nobles, attacked with his spear. Alexander barely dodged. Immediately after, Spithridates raised his sword. He would split his head. At that moment, Clytus arrived and cut off Spithridates' arm from the shoulder. While this personal duel continued, the Macedonian phalanx, had managed to cross the river. The center of the Persian line collapsed. Greek mercenaries showed the last resistance, but they too were surrounded and destroyed. Victory was won, but Alexander was face to face with death. This battle revealed his brave, but at the same time careless nature. Sardis, Ephesus, Miletus. Cities fell one by one. Alexander applied the same tactic everywhere. Mercy to those who surrendered, destruction to those who resisted. The siege of Halicarnassus was difficult. The commander of the city, Memnon, was an experienced Greek commander. After months of siege, the city fell, but Memnon managed to escape. In the city of Gordion, he encountered the famous knot. According to legend, whoever solved this knot would become king of Asia. Alexander examined the knot at length, then drew his sword and cut the knot in half. Solving was not necessary. Cutting gave the same result. This was a perfect example of his problem-solving approach. At the Battle of Issus, he faced Persian King Darius III for the first time. Darius had come with a huge army, planning to crush Alexander. The numbers were incredible. 600,000 infantry, 300,000 cavalry, 200 scythed chariots. But Darius made a strategic mistake by deploying his army in the narrow Issus Valley. This valley eliminated the numerical superiority of the Persian army. Alexander immediately assessed the situation. He applied the classic diagonal attack tactic, but this time in an even more refined way. He kept the phalanxes in the center, gathered the heavy cavalry on the right wing. The Salian cavalry on the left wing would hold the Persian right wing. Critical point. The moment the center forces opened a gap in the enemy line, Alexander would attack Darius directly. The battle began in the early morning hours. Persian scythed chariots rushed forward, but Macedonian infantry allowed the chariots to pass by, leaving gaps, then surrounded them from behind. This tactic surprised the Persian cavalry. Alexander was focused on breaking through the enemy line on the right wing at that time. He launched a V-shaped attack with the companion cavalry. The Persian left wing collapsed. In the center, Macedonian sarissas began to repel Persian infantry. Alexander was watching for this moment. When he located the point where Darius was, he turned his cavalry in that direction. He charged directly toward the Persian king. The guards around Darius fought desperately, but could not withstand the pressure of the Macedonians. Darius's chariot was stuck in the mud. Around him lay dead and wounded Persian nobles. Alexander was attacking directly toward the king with one of his cavalrymen. At that moment, Darius lost his nerves, left his chariot, jumped on his spare horse, and fled. The army scattered, seeing the Persian king's flight. This sight was a disgrace never seen in Eastern history. What was captured after the battle was incredible. Darius's tent was filled with gold. More importantly, the king's family had been captured. Queen Mother Sysigambis, wife Statera, and their children. Alexander treated them with royal courtesy. He bowed before Sysigambis, addressed her as mother. This gesture impressed all Persian aristocracy. The siege of Tyre demonstrated Alexander's engineering genius. The city, built on an island, seemed almost impregnable. Double-wall fortifications rose from the sea. Its harbor was protected by strong chains. The Tyrians were not worried at all. No one had been able to take them for centuries. But Alexander was determined to accomplish the impossible. The first plan was to blockade the island. Macedonian and Greek ships surrounded the harbor. But Tyre had strong trade ties with Carthage, constantly receiving support by sea. Blockade alone would not be enough. Alexander consulted with his engineers. They would build a causeway between the land and the island. The work was incredibly difficult. The seabed was muddy and deep. Stones kept sinking. Tyrians were attacking from above with a rain of arrows. Alexander had huge wooden towers built to protect the work area. Counterfire was opened from atop these towers, but the Tyrians managed to burn the towers with night raids. Months passed, and the causeway was progressing. The distance between the island and land was closing. Tyrians attacked the causeway with ships full of flammable materials. Great fires broke out, but Alexander did not give up. He brought new workers, gathered new materials. All the trees in the region were cut down. Stone quarries were opened for the causeway. At the end of 7 months, the causeway was completed. Now Tyre was not an island, but a peninsula. Alexander placed siege engines on the causeway. Giant siege machines targeted the foundations of the walls. The Tyrians were resisting desperately, but now their end had come. The walls began to collapse. In the final assault, Alexander personally climbed the walls. The battle was literally like a nightmare. Fighting took place house by house, room by room in narrow streets. The Tyrians resisted to their last breath, but the city fell. 7,000 warriors were killed. 30,000 people were sold as slaves. The fall of Tyre had shaken the entire eastern Mediterranean. Now every city understood that Alexander could not be resisted. His entry into Egypt was like a triumphal procession. Egyptians saw Alexander as a liberator to free them from Persian rule. He wore the pharaoh's crown in Memphis, was declared son of the gods with ancient rituals. But more importantly, he founded the city of Alexandria in the Nile Delta. This city would become one of the most important cities in world history. His journey to the oasis of Ammon was a mysterious adventure. In this sacred place in the middle of the desert was the temple of Zeus Ammon. Alexander met with priests there, but what they discussed was never known. When he came out of the temple, he was like a different person. He now truly saw himself as the son of a god. This belief both strengthened and changed him. The Battle of Gaugamela was the battle of destiny. Darius had played his last card, gathered all the power of the empire. The numbers were terrifying. 1 million infantry, 40,000 cavalry, 200 scythed chariots, 15 elephants. Alexander found himself facing an army of unprecedented size in history. The night before the battle, he could not sleep, made plans. His commanders were worried, suggesting a night attack. But Alexander did not want to steal such a victory. The battlefield had been carefully chosen by Darius. The wide, flat plain was suitable for scythed chariots to maneuver. Persian campfires lit up the sky at night. The Macedonian army seemed tiny compared to this enormous power. 40,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry. But Alexander would close the numerical gap with tactical superiority. In the early morning hours, the Macedonian army moved into battle formation. Alexander's plan was this: engage the enemy center, weaken the flanks, then break through the Persian line with a diagonal attack. The phalanx would advance in the center. Companion cavalry would strike on the right wing. Thessalian cavalry would hold on the left wing. Scythed chariots attacked as the first wave. The ground was shaking, horses foaming, chariots approaching with a terrible noise. But the Macedonians were prepared. Infantry units opened corridors between them. Chariots were passed through the gaps. Light infantry in the rear targeted the charioteers. Most chariots were neutralized. The elephant attack was more difficult. These giant animals caused panic in the Macedonian left wing, but Alexander was prepared for elephant warfare. Specially trained units targeted the elephants' feet and legs. Wounded elephants went out of control, began attacking their own armies. The real battle took place in the cavalry clash. Alexander attacked the Persian right wing at the head of the companion cavalry. The target was clear. Open a gap in the enemy line, then attack the center. Macedonian cavalry were advancing in arrow-shaped formation, trying to pierce the Persian line with their spears. Meanwhile, the situation in the center was critical. Darius had sent his powerful immortal unit against the Macedonian phalanx. Macedonian sarissas and Persian spears were clashing. Neither side was backing down. But on Alexander's left wing, there was a big problem. Units under Parmenion's command could not withstand the pressure of the Persian right wing. Alexander made the critical decision. Instead of going to help the left wing, he would continue the attack. He charged toward the enemy center with the companion cavalry. A gap had opened in the Persian line. Alexander passed through this gap and advanced directly toward Darius. This time Darius did not try to flee. He was waiting for Alexander with his spear on his chariot. The duel of two leaders had symbolic importance. The future of the East would be determined in this clash. Alexander's spear knocked down Darius's charioteer. The king almost fell. At that moment, he was rescued at the last moment by his guards and left the battlefield. The Persian king's flight collapsed the army's morale. The center began to disintegrate, but the situation on the left wing was still critical. Parmenion sent an urgent help message. Alexander left his victory halfway and went to help Parmenion. The Persian right wing was repelled. The loot captured after the battle was incredible. Darius's palace treasury, personal belongings, war elephants. But most importantly, the heart of the Persian Empire was now in Alexander's hands. After Gaugamela, no one could stand against him anymore. His entry into Babylon was a fantastic sight. The city's people greeted him with flowers. Alexander settled in Nebuchadnezzar's palace, toured the ziggurat towers. Here he made important decisions. He left local administrators in their positions, showed respect for traditions. This policy was the beginning of the fusion policy he applied in all his conquests. The burning of Persepolis was a controversial event. After the magnificent capital of the Persian Empire was taken, the city was burned during a night feast. According to rumor, Alexander was drunk and set the city on fire at the instigation of the Athenian Hetaira Thais. The next morning he regretted it, but the deed was done. Perhaps this was a conscious move, to show that the old order had completely ended. While pursuing Darius, he received news that the Persian king had been killed by his own men. A satrap named Bessus had killed him, declared himself king. When Alexander found Darius's body, he granted him the right to burial with royal ceremony. He now saw himself as the legitimate heir to the Persian Empire. In the campaigns in Sogdiana and Bactria, he encountered a completely different type of warfare. Traditional phalanx warfare did not work here. The enemy hid in the mountains and made raids, disappeared very quickly. A local leader named Spitamenes was waging effective guerrilla warfare. The Macedonian army was not accustomed to this type of warfare, struggled greatly. Alexander had to change his tactics. Instead of a large army, he began using small, fast units. Local cavalry joined his army. Bactrian and Sogdian horsemen were even faster than Macedonian cavalry. Alexander learned their tactics, developed his own understanding of warfare. During these campaigns, he applied a political marriage strategy. He formed alliances with local nobles, arranged for them to marry their daughters. His love with Roxana also began during this period. While besieging the unreachable fortress called Sogdiana Rock, he saw Roxana, the daughter of the fortress commander. He was enchanted by her beauty. Roxana was not only beautiful, but also an intelligent and brave woman. Her father Oxyartes was a powerful Sogdiana lord. This marriage contained both love and political calculation. Alexander wanted to make peace with the local people, to win them over. But Macedonian commanders strongly opposed this marriage. But Alexander had changed now. He wore Persian clothes, applied Persian court ceremonies. Macedonian nobles were uncomfortable with this. The tension between them exploded in the Clitus incident. During an argument at a feast, Clitus, who had known Alexander since childhood, opposed him. Alexander threw his spear in anger. Clitus was struck in the chest and died. When he realized he had killed his friend, he went mad, did not eat for days. The Indian campaign was his greatest adventure. When he encountered King Porus at the Hydaspes River, he would fight the toughest enemy he had ever seen. Porus was a giant man with a height exceeding 2 meters. His army had 200 elephants, 300 chariots, 30,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry. But the real problem was the elephants. The Macedonians were not accustomed to elephant warfare. Alexander examined the situation from across the river. A direct attack would be suicide. If the elephants liked water, cavalry would have no chance. Taking advantage of a windy and rainy night, he crossed upstream with part of his army. He left the rest to Craterus, gave him the task of diversion. When morning came, Porus was shocked. The enemy was on both sides of the river. He had to make a critical decision. Which side would he focus on? He sent his son Porus with a small force against Alexander, focused himself with the main forces on Craterus. This was a strategic mistake. Alexander easily defeated young Porus. Then he attacked the main forces. But this time, he had to face the elephant problem. Companion cavalry could not approach the elephants. Alexander developed a new tactic. Light infantry would harass the elephants. Cavalry would cut off escape routes. The battle lasted for hours. Most of the elephants were wounded, had become uncontrollable. Wounded elephants were attacking their own armies, creating panic. Porus fought to the end. He was wounded 9 times but did not surrender. He only gave up when someone of similar stature came and convinced him. When Alexander asked Porus how he wanted to be treated, he said, "Like a king." This answer greatly impressed Alexander. He made Porus governor in his own lands, counted him among his number. This was a perfect political move. He had both won over the enemy and sent a message to Indian lords. But in this battle, Alexander's most loyal friend, Bucephalus, was wounded and died. They had been together for 16 years. Alexander was very sad, founded the city of Bucephala in his horse's name. Bucephalus's death was like a sign. The end of the adventure was approaching. But the soldiers were tired now. They had been marching for 10 years, fighting. They missed their homes, their families. On the banks of the Hyphasis River, they rebelled. They did not want to advance further. They wanted to return to Macedonia. Alexander tried to convince them, but in vain. For the first time in his life, he had been defeated by his own soldiers. The return journey was like a nightmare. He decided to cross the Gedrosian Desert. This was known as the Death Desert in the ancient world. The army was almost destroyed. Thousands of soldiers died. Alexander also fell ill. The first symptoms of his fatal illness began in this desert. When he returned to Babylon, Alexander was full of completely different plans. Arabian campaign, surrounding the entire Mediterranean, founding new cities. But his body no longer matched his soul's ambition. He began to feel unwell in May. He had a fever, severe pains in his stomach. What the disease was is still debatable. Poison, malaria, typhoid. He lay in bed for 10 days. His commanders were asking him questions about the future, but he could not answer. When he breathed his last, his closest friends were with him. When he died, he was only 32 years old, but he had changed the world. Great controversies arose over his funeral. Where would he be buried? Finally, Ptolemy kidnapped the body and took it to Egypt. He was buried in Alexandria, but his tomb was lost, still has not been found. His empire fell apart with his death. Bloody wars began among his commanders called the Diadochi. Macedonia, Egypt, Syria, Pergamon. Dozens of kingdoms were founded, but none reached Alexander's greatness. His legacy was tremendous. The cities he founded became centers of civilization. Hellenistic culture uniting East and West lasted for thousands of years. Science, art, philosophy. It led to development in every field. The Library of Alexandria was the Harvard of the ancient world. But he was also the founder of the empire dream. Rome, Byzantium, Ottoman. All followed his example. The dream of ruling the world from one hand began with Alexander. So, friends, this is the story of Alexander the Great. The adventure he began at 20 changed the world in 12 years. After victories he never lost, he was defeated by his own ambition. With his death, he became a legend. His name was mentioned for thousands of years. The question of how a human can accomplish so much, how he can leave so much mark in such a short time, still awaits an answer. Dear viewers, I hope you enjoyed this epic story of Alexander the Great. Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Alexander was truly great, or was he a lucky conqueror? If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. If you turn on notifications, you will be instantly informed of new videos. I will be with you in the next video with the story of another historical figure. Take care until then.